In a crisp Virginia morning, a 10-year-old boy in shabby, patched clothes stops a wealthy CEO in his tracks with a daring vow. "Your daughter can walk again." The CEO's heart skips a beat, his mind reeling. A kid, barely tall enough to peer over the wheelchair, claiming what top doctors couldn't deliver. He scoffs, suspicion flaring. Yet the boy's steady gaze, forged through years of racial slurs and sneers branding him a troublemaker, holds an unshakable truth. Branded a dreamer, doubted by a world quick to judge his worn shoes and dark skin, the boy stands firm, his heart a beacon. Against all logic, the CEO offers him a chance. This isn't just a tale of hope. It's a battle against prejudice, fueled by grit and a spark that could ignite change. Can his courage outshine the world's doubts? Subscribe for our latest stories, share where you're watching from, and stay to see faith clash with fear. You won't want to miss this ending. The October morning in Richmond, Virginia, carried a bite that stung the fingertips and turned breath into fleeting clouds. The park outside Richmond Pediatric Hospital hummed with restless energy. Nurses and scrubs darted between shifts. Parents clutched coffee cups like lifelines, and the occasional siren wailed in the distance. Amid this hurried chaos, a small figure sat still, a quiet anchor in the storm. A 10-year-old black boy perched on a worn blanket spread across the grass, his knees tucked close, a spiral notebook balanced on his lap. His pencil danced with purpose, sketching the sharp lines of a sparrow's wing. His jacket, a faded hand-me-down, hung loose on his slight frame, and his sneakers bore frayed laces, one sole patched with duct tape. A cardboard sign beside him, scrawled in careful marker, read "Free drawings for smiles." He didn't look up, not even when footsteps crunched nearby. His dark eyes, sharp and watchful, scanned the crowd, not with desperation but with a quiet intensity, as if he were searching for something or someone. A middle-aged white woman in a wool coat hurried past, her purse clutched tight. She paused, glanced at the boy, and tossed a quarter onto his blanket. It landed with a dull thud. "Don't waste it on candy, kid," she muttered, already turning away. The boy's pencil stopped. He reached for the coin, his small fingers curling around it, and slid it back toward her. "Ma'am," he said, his voice clear and steady, "I don't take money, just smiles." The woman froze, her lips parting as if to argue, but his calm gaze held her. She scoffed a sharp sound and strode off, muttering under her breath. The boy shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his mouth, and returned to his sketch. From the hospital's entrance, a security guard, a black man with graying hair and a kind but firm face, watched the exchange. He'd seen the boy here for weeks, always sketching, never begging, never causing trouble. He shook his head, a mix of pride and pity in his eyes. Across the street, a sleek black Tesla idled, its engine a low hum against the morning's clamor. Inside, a man in his mid-30s gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles pale. His tailored suit was rumpled, the tie loosened like an afterthought, and his jawline, sharp enough to cut glass, was shadowed with stubble. His graying temples betrayed the weight of years beyond his age. In the back seat, an 8-year-old girl sat, her blonde hair tied in a loose braid, a quilted blanket draped over her legs. Her eyes, wide and blue, stared out the window, fixed on the bare branches of a maple tree. A year ago, she'd been a whirlwind, climbing trees, chasing fireflies, her laughter a constant song. Now, after a car accident that stole her ability to walk, she was a ghost of that girl, her silence louder than any scream. The man glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his chest tightening. "Ready, kiddo?" he asked, his voice soft but strained. "We've got Dr. Ellis today. She's the best, right?" The girl nodded, barely, her gaze never leaving the window. "Yeah, sure," she whispered, the words hollow. He stepped out, opened the back door, and lifted her into her wheelchair with practiced care, as if she were made of porcelain. He adjusted the blanket over her legs, his movements mechanical, and began pushing her toward the hospital's glass doors. The wheels clicked rhythmically on the pavement, a sound that had become his life's metronome. The crowd parted around them, eyes averted, offering the polite distance reserved for grief. He didn't notice the boy at first, not until they were nearly past the blanket. The boy's head snapped up, his pencil pausing mid-stroke. He studied the girl's pale face, the way her hands clutched the blanket, and the man's shoulders, hunched as if carrying the world. Something flickered in the boy's eyes. Recognition not of faces, but of pain. He stood, clutching his notebook, and stepped forward. "Sir," he called, his voice cutting through the morning din, "I can help your daughter walk again." The man stopped dead, his hands tightening on the wheelchair's handles. The words hung in the air, absurd, impossible. He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as they landed on the boy, small, scrawny, in clothes that screamed hardship. "What did you say?" he asked, his tone low, edged with warning. The boy didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his notebook tucked under one arm, his gaze unwavering. "I said I can help her walk again," he repeated. Not loud, not pleading, but with a clarity that felt older than his years. The girl tilted her head, her eyes flickering with curiosity, the first spark of life in her face all morning. The man stared, his mind racing. This had to be a prank, a scam, some cruel twist. Yet the boy's voice wasn't slick or rehearsed. It was steady, like a fact carved in stone. "That's not funny, kid," the man snapped, his voice sharp enough to draw glances from passers-by. "You don't know what you're talking about." The boy's expression didn't waver. "I'm not joking, sir," he said. "My grandma was a healer. She taught me how to help people move again." The man's eyes flicked over the boy's patched jeans, the duct-taped sneaker, the cracked edges of his notebook. "A healer? This kid?" He opened his mouth to dismiss him, to walk away, but the girl's voice stopped him. "Daddy," she said softly. "He sounds like he means it." The man looked down at her, startled. Her eyes were fixed on the boy, searching, hopeful in a way he hadn't seen in months. He exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Look, kid," he said, softer now but still firm. "We've got doctors, specialists, the best in the state. You can't just—" He cut himself off, shaking his head. The boy stood there, silent, waiting, his calm unnerving. The man glanced at his daughter, then back at the boy, torn between anger and something he couldn't name. "Stay out of our way," he said finally, turning the wheelchair toward the hospital. But as he pushed through the glass doors, the boy's words clung to him, stubborn, like a melody he couldn't unhear. Inside, the sterile hum of the hospital swallowed them, but the man's mind stayed outside, replaying that small, steady voice. The boy watched them go, his fingers tightening around his notebook, his eyes fixed on the doors as if he already knew they'd be back. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow over the waiting room, where Jason Martin sat, his elbows on his knees staring at the linoleum floor. His daughter Laura sat beside him in her wheelchair, her small hands folded beneath the quilted blanket, her eyes tracing the ceiling tiles. The words of the boy outside, "I can help your daughter walk again," looped in Jason's mind, as persistent as a heartbeat. He'd dismissed them, of course. A kid in duct-taped sneakers barely older than Laura claiming to outdo specialists. Absurd. Yet the boy's voice, calm and unyielding, had lodged itself in Jason's thoughts, a splinter he couldn't ignore. Laura's quiet words, "He sounds like he means it," only deepened the unease. Now, as Dr. Ellis delivered her measured update, her voice a familiar hum of slow progress and manage expectations, Jason's attention drifted. He nodded mechanically, but his gaze kept flicking to the glass doors, to the park beyond where that boy had stood. Outside, the October air had grown sharper, the afternoon sun slanting low, painting the grass in gold. Paul Perez knelt on his blanket, packing his notebook into a frayed backpack. The hospital crowd had thinned, leaving only the occasional straggler. A white jogger, earbuds dangling, slowed as he passed, his eyes narrowing at Paul's sign. "Free drawings for smiles." "What's this, kid, some kind of hustle?" he sneered, loud enough to turn heads. Paul looked up, his expression steady. "Just drawing, sir. You want one?" The jogger snorted, muttering, "Scam," and jogged off. From the hospital entrance, Mr. Harris, the security guard, stepped forward, his voice firm. "Leave the boy alone. He's not bothering you." The jogger waved a dismissive hand but kept moving. Paul shrugged, unfazed, but his fingers tightened briefly on his pencil, a flicker of weariness in his dark eyes. That evening, in a cramped apartment across town, Paul sat at a wobbly kitchen table, the scent of simmering beans filling the air. His Aunt Maria, her hair pulled back from a long shift at the diner, stirred a pot, her face etched with worry. "Paul, you can't keep sitting outside that hospital," she said, her voice low but urgent. "Folks talk, they see a black boy alone, they assume things. Trouble, theft, worse." Paul's gaze dropped to his grandmother's therapy notebook, its pages worn from countless readings. Diagrams of muscles and joints, scribbled notes on pressure points, stared back at him. "I'm not trouble, Aunt Maria," he said quietly. "I'm helping like Grandma did." Maria sighed, setting the spoon down. "I know, baby. But the world doesn't always see you the way it should. Your grandma learned that the hard way." Paul traced a faded note in her handwriting. "The body listens if you speak with care," and nodded. "I'll be careful," he promised. But his eyes held a fire that no caution could dim. The next morning, the hospital park was alive again, the air crisp with the promise of fall. Jason wheeled Laura out after another appointment, his shoulders hunched, the weight of routine pressing harder than ever. Dr. Ellis's words, "minor nerve responses, long road ahead," echoed dully in his mind. Laura was silent, her braid slipping loose, her gaze fixed on a squirrel darting across the grass. As they neared the curb, Jason's eyes caught a familiar figure, the boy, still on his blanket, sketching with that same focused intensity. A young black mother and her daughter, no older than 6, stood nearby, the girl giggling as the boy handed her a drawing of a butterfly. The mother's tired face softened, and she mouthed a quiet, "Thank you." Jason slowed, watching. The boy's ease, his quiet generosity, felt at odds with the audacity of his claim. A white woman in her 30s, pushing a stroller, passed the boy's blanket and muttered loudly, "Why's he even here? Probably fishing for handouts." Mr. Harris nearby shook his head. "Ma'am, that boy's been giving out drawings for weeks, no harm in him." The woman huffed, hurrying off. Jason overheard, his jaw tightening. The dismissal, the assumption, it grated, though he couldn't say why. He stopped a few feet from the boy, who looked up, his pencil pausing. "You again," Jason said, his voice gruff but less sharp than before. "Why'd you say that about my daughter? What's your angle?" The boy stood, tucking his notebook under his arm, his gaze meeting Jason's without a hint of fear. "No angle, sir," he said. "My grandma was a physical therapist. She helped people walk, vets, old folks, kids. She taught me how to talk. To the body, how to help it remember." Jason's eyes narrowed, taking in the boy's patched jeans, the cracked lenses of glasses hanging from his collar. "You're 10, he said, disbelief heavy in his tone. "What could you possibly know?" The boy didn't waver. "I watched her every day," he said. "She passed last year, but I kept her lessons. I know I can help." Laura, who'd been silent, leaned forward slightly, her voice soft. "Daddy, he's not lying, I can tell." Jason glanced at her, startled. Her eyes, usually so distant, were fixed on the boy, searching, alive with something he hadn't seen in months, trust. He rubbed the back of his neck, torn between logic and the inexplicable pull of his daughter's words. "You've got no business making promises like that," Jason said, but his voice lacked conviction. The boy's calm, the way he stood his ground despite the world's sneers, was disarming. Jason's mind flashed to the countless hospital visits, the endless maybes from doctors, the weight of hope that kept slipping through his fingers. What did he have to lose? He exhaled sharply. "Fine," he said, the word clipped. "You want to try something? Meet us at Carver Park tomorrow, 10 a.m. Don't waste our time, kid." The boy nodded, his face serious. "I'll be there." "Sir?" Jason turned the wheelchair toward the Tesla, his steps heavy. But Laura glanced back, her lips curving in a faint, hopeful smile. That night, Jason sat in his sleek home office, a glass of untouched whiskey on his desk. He opened his laptop, typing Perez Richmond healer into the search bar. A few scattered results appeared, an old newsletter mentioning Monique Perez, a physical therapist who ran free clinics for the underserved. No address, no recent trace. He shut the laptop, leaning back, his mind a tangle of doubt and curiosity. The boy was a ghost, a nobody. Yet Laura's voice, "He's not lying," echoed. And for the first time in a year, Jason felt the stir of something dangerous. Possibility. Outside, the city lights glittered, indifferent. But in that moment, a single question burned. Could a boy with nothing change everything? The sun broke through the October clouds, casting dappled light across Carver Park, a modest patch of green in Richmond's heart, where joggers weaved past dog walkers and children chased laughter across the grass. Under a sprawling maple tree, its leaves a riot of amber and crimson, Paul Perez knelt on a faded towel, arranging his tools with the precision of a ritual. A small duffel bag lay open beside him, revealing a cloth-wrapped rice pack, still warm. From the microwave, a worn rubber ball and a pair of clean socks folded neatly. His patched jeans caught the morning breeze, and his sneakers, one sole held together by duct tape, pressed into the earth. At 10 years old, Paul carried himself with a quiet gravity, his dark eyes scanning the park, not with nervousness, but with purpose. He'd promised to be here, and promises, as his grandmother had taught him, were as binding as blood. Across the park, a sleek black Tesla glided to a stop along the curb, its engine humming softly before falling silent. Jason Martin stepped out, his tailored jacket unbuttoned, his face a mask of guarded skepticism. He opened the back door and lifted Laura, his 8-year-old daughter, into her wheelchair, her blonde braids swaying as he adjusted the quilted blanket. Over her legs, Laura's eyes, bright but wary, darted across the park, landing on Paul's small setup under the tree. Jason's jaw tightened as he pushed her forward, his steps deliberate, each one a silent argument with himself. This was madness. A kid, a nobody, claiming to heal what a year of specialists couldn't. Yet Laura's trust, her quiet insistence from yesterday, had tipped the scales. He'd give the boy one chance. Nothing more. Paul stood as they approached, brushing grass from his knees, his spiral notebook tucked safely in his bag. "Morning, sir," he said, his voice clear and steady, then turned to Laura with a softer tone. "Hi, Laura, I'm Paul." She managed a small smile, her fingers twisting the edge of her blanket. "Hi," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jason stopped a few feet away, arms crossed, his posture a wall of doubt. "All right, kid," he said, his tone clipped. "You wanted this. Show me what you've got." Paul nodded, unfazed, and knelt beside Laura's wheelchair, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he sensed the fragility of the moment. "Is it okay if I work with your legs?" Paul asked Laura, his eyes meeting hers with a gentleness that belied his age. "If anything feels bad, you just say stop, okay?" Laura glanced at her father, then back at Paul, nodding. "Okay." Paul unwrapped the warm rice pack, its faint earthy scent mingling with the crisp air, and placed it gently across her thighs. Laura flinched slightly, her breath catching. "Too hot?" Paul asked, his hand hovering. She shook her head. "It feels good," she said, her voice tinged with surprise. Jason's eyes narrowed, watching every move, his hands twitching as if ready to intervene. Paul began, his small hands guiding Laura's legs through slow, careful rotations, side to side, up and down, never forcing, only coaxing. His touch was light but sure, as if he were speaking a language only the body could hear. "Your muscles remember how to move," he said softly, more to Laura than to Jason. "We just gotta remind them little by little." To ease her nerves, he shifted gears. "You like drawing? I do birds mostly. Sparrows, hawks, what do you like?" Laura's face softened, a spark flickering in her eyes. "Unicorns," she said, her voice stronger now. "And stars." Paul grinned. Unicorns are cool. Bet you draw 'em with sparkly horns, right? She giggled, a sound so rare it made Jason's breath catch. A white jogger in his 20s slowed nearby, his earbuds dangling, his gaze lingering on Paul's setup. "What's this?" he called, his voice loud and mocking. "Some kind of street act? Kid thinks he's a doctor?" Paul's hands paused for a fraction of a second, but his focus stayed on Laura. Jason's head snapped toward the jogger, his voice cutting like a blade. "He's helping my daughter. Mind your own damn business." The jogger raised his hands, smirking, and jogged off, but the air felt heavier, the sting of judgment lingering. Paul ignored it, tapping Laura's knee gently with his knuckle. "Feel anything?" he asked. Laura hesitated, her brow furrowing. "Like a tingle," she said, almost unsure. "Maybe." Jason leaned forward, his skepticism cracking. "You sure, honey?" he asked, his voice softer, urgent. Laura nodded, her eyes wide. "Yeah, it's small, but it's there." Paul's lips curved in a faint smile, not triumphant but encouraging. "That's a start," he said, packing the rice pack back into his bag. "We'll keep going next Sunday. Takes time, but your legs are listening." Jason stared at him, the boy's calm certainty disarming. This wasn't a scam or a stunt. It was something else, something he couldn't name. As Paul folded the towel, a familiar figure approached from the park's edge. Mr. Harris, the hospital security guard, had his graying hair catching the sunlight. Beside him walked a 9-year-old black boy, his steps uneven, supported by a walker. "Morning, Paul," Mr. Harris said, his voice warm but cautious. "This is my grandson, Tyler. He's got cerebral palsy. Been watching you at the hospital. Thought maybe—" He trailed off, glancing at Jason, who raised an eyebrow. Paul knelt to Tyler's level, his smile genuine. "Hey, Tyler, want to try some exercises with us? I got a rubber band that helps make legs stronger." Tyler, shy but curious, nodded. Paul turned to Tyler's parents, who'd followed behind, and explained a simple ankle-strengthening move, his words clear and confident. Jason watched, his arms uncrossing, his posture loosening. The boy wasn't just bold. He knew things no 10-year-old should. "Where'd you learn this?" Jason asked, his tone more curious than accusing. Paul didn't look up, his hands steady as he showed Tyler's mother how to position. "The rubber band. My grandma," he said simply. "She helped folks who couldn't afford fancy clinics. Took me with her after school. Said everybody deserves to feel strong." Mr. Harris nodded, a quiet pride in his eyes. "Monique Perez was a good woman," he said. "Helped my wife years ago. Looks like her spirit's still here." The session ended with Laura smiling, her fingers tracing imaginary stars in the air, and Tyler clutching a new rubber band, his parents murmuring thanks. Paul packed his bag, his movements unhurried, as if the weight of the morning's work was nothing. Jason wheeled Laura back to the Tesla, but his steps were slower, his mind churning. "See you next week?" Paul called, his voice carrying a quiet challenge. Jason paused, glancing at Laura, who nodded eagerly. "Yeah," he said, the word heavy with something new, trust, or the beginnings of it. As the Tesla pulled away, Paul stood under the maple, his silhouette small but unshakable, a boy who'd just planted a seed in a world too stubborn to notice. The autumn sun hung low over Carver Park, bathing the grass in a golden haze that softened the edges of Richmond's urban sprawl. Under the familiar maple tree, its leaves, now a deeper crimson, Paul Perez smoothed out his worn towel, his small hands moving with the quiet reverence of habit. His duffel bag spilled open beside him, revealing the rice pack, rubber ball, and socks, each item a relic of his grandmother's lessons. At 10, Paul carried a weight most adults would buckle under, yet his dark eyes held only focus, scanning the park as joggers and families drifted past. His patched jeans and duct-taped sneakers marked him as an outsider in a world quick to judge. But here, in this patch of green, he was building something that felt like home. The hum of a Tesla announced Jason Martin's arrival, its sleek frame glinting as it parked along the curb. Jason stepped out, his suit jacket swapped for a casual sweater, his face less guarded than weeks before, but still etched with the strain of a father clinging to hope. He lifted Laura from the back seat, settling her into her wheelchair with a tenderness that had become second nature. Laura's blonde braid bounced as she craned her neck, her blue eyes searching for Paul. A faint smile tugged at her lips, a spark of anticipation that hadn't been there a month ago. Jason pushed her toward the maple, his step steady but his mind uneasy. The boy's methods, simple, almost absurdly so, had yielded results. Laura's toes wiggled now, her knees twitched. Yet doubt lingered, a shadow Jason couldn't shake. Paul stood as they approached, his spiral notebook tucked away, his voice warm but professional. "Morning, Laura," he said, kneeling to her level. "Ready to try some new stretches?" Laura nodded eagerly, her fingers loosening their grip on her blanket. "Yeah, I practiced the toe thing all week." Paul's grin flashed, brief but bright. "That's the spirit." Jason watched, his arms crossed loosely, no longer a wall, but a cautious observer. Paul guided Laura's legs through familiar motions, slow rotations, gentle presses, his hands steady as he placed the warm rice pack across her thighs. "You're doing great," he murmured. Then, to keep her at ease, added, "Got any new unicorn drawings?" Laura giggled, launching into a story about a starry-maned unicorn named Glitter. Jason's lips twitched, a rare softness breaking through his reserve. The park buzzed with Sunday morning life, but not all eyes were kind. A group of teens, a mix of races, loitered near a bench, their laughter sharp and careless. One, a white boy with a backward cap, nudged his friend, pointing at Paul's setup. "Yo, check this kid," he called, loud enough to carry. "What's he doing, playing doctor with his little towel?" The others snickered, their voices a jagged edge. In the morning air, Paul's hands faltered for a heartbeat, but he kept his focus on Laura, his voice steady as he asked her to try flexing her ankles. Jason's head snapped toward the teens, his jaw tightening. "Ignore them," he muttered, more to himself, then to Paul, but Laura's smile faded, her eyes flicking nervously toward the group. Paul straightened, meeting the lead teen's gaze. "I'm just helping," he said calmly. "You can watch if you want." The teen smirked, stepping closer. "Helping? Man, you're out here with duct-tape shoes acting like you're running a clinic." The words stung, laced with the casual cruelty of youth, but Paul's expression didn't waver. Before he could respond, Jason stepped forward, his voice low and fierce. "Back off," he said, his CEO Polish giving way to raw protectiveness. "This kid's done more for my daughter than you'll ever understand. He's an angel to her, you hear me?" The teens froze, caught off guard by the intensity in his eyes. Laura, her voice small but clear, added, "He's my angel." The lead teen muttered something under his breath but backed away, his friends trailing behind, their laughter quieter now. Paul ducked his head, a flush of gratitude warming his cheeks, but he returned to Laura without a word, guiding her through a final stretch. Jason watched, his chest tight with a mix of anger and awe. The boy's resilience, his ability to shrug off cruelty and keep going, was something Jason hadn't seen in boardrooms or hospitals. As the session wrapped up, Laura flexed her toes with more control, her grin wide. "I felt it stronger today," she said. Paul nodded, packing his bag. "You're waking 'em up, Laura. Keep practicing." The park's rhythm shifted as a new family approached, a Latina couple with their teenage daughter Sophia, who sat in a wheelchair, her dark hair pulled into a tight ponytail. Her parents introduced themselves, their voices hesitant but hopeful. "We heard about you," the mother said to Paul. "Our Sophia had a spinal injury. Can you try with her?" Paul glanced at Jason, who gave a slight nod, then knelt beside Sophia. "Hi, Sophia. I can show you some exercises, if that's okay. Nothing fancy, just stuff to help your legs talk to your brain." Sophia, guarded but curious, agreed. Paul adapted his approach, using the rubber ball to press gently on her feet, explaining pressure points with a clarity that belied his age. From the park's edge, Aunt Maria arrived, a jug of homemade lemonade in her hands, her diner uniform peeking out beneath her jacket. She watched Paul work, her face a mix of pride and worry. Setting the jug down, she approached Jason, her voice low. "He's got his grandma's heart," she said. "But I worry. Folks don't always like a black boy standing out like this." Jason met her gaze, his expression softening. "I've seen it," he said. "The way people look at him. But he's changing minds out here, Maria, including mine." Maria nodded, her eyes glistening, but her lips pressed tight as if holding back a flood of fears. As the session ended, Sophia's mother thanked Paul profusely, and Laura waved at Sophia, a shy connection forming. Jason helped Laura back to the Tesla, but his steps were lighter, his mind buzzing. The boy wasn't just helping Laura, he was drawing others in, building something bigger than any of them expected. "Same time next week?" Paul called, his voice steady but warm. Jason turned, locking eyes with him. "Wouldn't miss it," he said, the words carrying a weight he hadn't anticipated. As the Tesla pulled away, Paul stood beside Aunt Maria, the lemonade jug between them, the park alive with the hum of possibility. The teen's taunts echoed faintly in his mind, but they were drowned out by Laura's smile, Sophia's hope, and the quiet certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The fifth Sunday dawned gray over Carver Park, the Richmond sky heavy with clouds that seemed to press down on the world below. The maple tree, its leaves now a brittle scarlet, swayed in a restless breeze, casting jagged shadows across Paul Perez's worn towel. At 10, Paul knelt with the same quiet precision, arranging his rice pack, rubber ball, and socks, but his dark eyes held a flicker of weariness. The park had become a sanctuary, a place where his grandmother's lessons breathed life into hope. Yet the weight of expectation, Laura's progress, of new families joining, of whispered judgment, settled on his small shoulders. His patched jeans and duct-taped sneakers grounded him, a reminder of who he was, a boy with nothing but a heart that refused to break. The familiar hum of Jason Martin's Tesla cut through the morning's hush, pulling up to the curb with a glint of steel against the gloom. Jason stepped out, his sweater rumpled, his face drawn tighter than usual, as if the week had carved new lines into his skin. He lifted Laura from the back seat, settling her into her wheelchair, but her blonde braid hung limp, her blue eyes, red-rimmed and distant. No smile greeted Paul today, only a clenched jaw and hands knotted in her quilted blanket. Jason pushed her toward the maple, his steps heavy, his gaze avoiding Paul's. The park felt quieter, the usual joggers and families scarce, as if the clouds had chased them away. Paul stood, brushing grass from his knees, his voice steady but soft. "Morning, Laura," he said, kneeling to her level. "Ready to work?" Laura's eyes flicked to him, then away, her silence a wall. Jason cleared his throat, his voice low and strained. "She's not in the mood today," he said, glancing at Laura, who stared at the ground. "Had a rough week. Hospital session was tough." Paul nodded, his gaze lingering on Laura's hunched shoulders. He'd seen that look before, in his grandmother's patience, in himself when grief had clawed too deep. "What happened?" he asked gently, not to Jason but to Laura, his tone an invitation, not a demand. Her lips trembled, and when she spoke, her voice cracked like thin ice. "I tried moving my legs at therapy," she said, "and nothing happened. Nothing. It's useless, Paul. I'm never gonna walk again." Tears spilled, hot and fast, and she buried her face in her hands, her wheelchair creaking as she shrank into it. Jason's face twisted, a mix of guilt and helplessness. He knelt beside her, his hand hovering over her shoulder, unsure whether to comfort or let her rage. "She's been like this all weekend," he murmured to Paul, almost an apology. Paul's chest tightened, the echo of his losses, his grandmother's. Slow fade, the nights he'd sat powerless, stirring in his bones. He shifted closer, his voice low but firm. "Laura, look at me," he said. She didn't move, but her sobs quieted, her breath hitching. "I get mad too," Paul continued, his words measured, each one carrying the weight of truth. When my grandma was sick, I couldn't do anything. I'd sit by her bed watching her hurt, and I'd cry so hard I thought I'd break. But she told me, "Keep going, Paul, even when it hurts. You're stronger than you think." Laura's hands dropped, her tear-streaked face lifting to meet his gaze. "You don't get it," she whispered. "It's not the same." Paul's eyes softened, but he didn't back down. "Maybe not," he said, "but I know what it's like to feel stuck. You're allowed to be mad, Laura. Just don't let it stop you." The park seemed to hold its breath, the clouds above swirling, as if waiting for her answer. Jason watched, his skepticism long gone, replaced by a quiet awe at the boy's ability to reach where he couldn't. A familiar figure approached, Mr. Harris, the hospital security guard, his graying hair catching the dim light, his grandson, Tyler by his side, gripping his walker with determination. Tyler's parents followed, their faces hopeful but cautious. "Didn't want to interrupt," Mr. Harris said, his voice warm. "But Tyler's been practicing that rubber band trick you showed us." Paul managed a small smile, but his focus stayed on Laura. "That's awesome, Tyler," he said, then turned back to her. "Want to try one exercise? Just one." "For me?" Laura wiped her face, her shoulders slumping, but she nodded, a fragile surrender. Paul knelt, placing the warm rice pack on her thighs, its faint heat coaxing a sigh from her. He guided her legs through slow stretches, his hands gentle but, sure, his voice a steady rhythm. "Just focus on your toes," he said. "Tell 'em to wiggle, even if they don't listen yet." Laura closed her eyes, her brow furrowing, her breath uneven. Jason, still kneeling, leaned closer, his voice soft. "You got this, kiddo," he said, his hand finally resting on her shoulder. The moment stretched, taut with effort, until Laura's toes twitched, a faint but unmistakable movement. Her eyes snapped open wide with disbelief. "I felt it," she whispered. Paul nodded, his smile quiet but proud. "See? They're still listening." The small crowd, Tyler, his parents, a few lingering joggers, erupted in soft claps, their faces alight with shared triumph. Tyler, inspired, gripped his walker and took a shaky step, his mother gasping. Mr. Harris caught Jason's eye, his voice low. "That boy's got Monique's spirit," he said, referring to Paul's grandmother. "Helped my wife walk after a stroke. Never gave up, just like him." Jason nodded, his throat tight. He'd come to the park a skeptic, but now he saw Paul for what he was, a spark in a world too quick to snuff out hope. As the session ended, Laura's smile returned, tentative but real, and she clutched a rubber ball Paul gave her to practice. Jason stood, his posture lighter, and approached Mr. Harris. "How'd you know his grandmother?" he asked. Mr. Harris's eyes softened. "Monique ran free clinics for folks like us, folks the system forgot. Paul was always there, carrying her bag, learning." Jason glanced at Paul, who was packing his duffel, and felt a pang of respect, tinged with guilt for his earlier doubts. The clouds parted, a sliver of sunlight breaking through, illuminating Paul as he stood under the maple, his small frame a quiet defiance against the world's weight. Laura waved at Tyler, her voice brighter. "See you next week?" Jason wheeled her back to the Tesla, but his steps slowed, his mind replaying Paul's words. Keep going, even when it hurts. He'd come to help his daughter, but something else was shifting, something deeper, pulling him into a story he hadn't expected to be part of. By the seventh Sunday, Carver Park pulsed with a life it hadn't known in years, its modest green transformed into a beacon of hope under Richmond's autumn sky. The maple tree, now shedding scarlet leaves like embers, stood sentinel over Paul Perez's worn towel, where the 10-year-old knelt, his duffel bag open to reveal the familiar tools of his trade, a rice pack, a rubber ball, socks folded with care. His patched jeans and duct-taped sneakers bore the scuffs of weeks spent here, but his dark eyes burned with a quiet fire, undimmed by the world's weight. Paul, at his core, was a boy who believed in promises. His grandmother's lessons, etched into his soul, were a vow to keep showing up no matter what. The park buzzed with new energy. A church group had hauled in folding chairs, their metal frames glinting in the morning sun, while a nearby diner sent a tray of bagels and a thermos of coffee, the aroma mingling with the crisp air. Families gathered, their faces a mix of hope and hesitation, drawn by whispers of a boy who worked miracles with nothing but patience and a towel. Laura Martin arrived in her wheelchair, her blonde braid catching the light, her smile brighter than it had been in weeks. Jason Martin pushed her forward, his sweater casual but his posture alert. A man no longer just a father but a believer in something larger. Laura's toes now moved with purpose, her knees twitched with promise, and Jason's eyes, once shadowed by doubt, followed Paul with a respect that bordered on reverence. Paul knelt beside Laura, his voice warm. "Morning, superstar," he said, placing the rice pack on her thighs. "Let's try lifting your ankles today." Laura nodded, her fingers tracing imaginary stars, her confidence a quiet triumph. Nearby, Sophia, the Latina teen with a spinal injury, worked with her parents, her dark ponytail swaying as she pressed her feet against Paul's rubber ball, her movement steadier each week. Tyler, Mr. Harris's grandson, gripped his walker, his steps surer, his grin wide as his mother cheered. Paul moved among them, his small frame a steady presence, offering tailored advice with a clarity that silenced skepticism. He showed Sophia's father how to massage pressure points, taught Tyler's mother to use a rubber band for strength, and never let Laura feel rushed. His patience was a language of its own. Aunt Maria stood at the edge, a jug of lemonade in her hands, her diner, uniform peeking from beneath her coat. Her eyes followed Paul, pride warring with worry. She'd seen the crowds grow, heard the murmurs of awe, but she knew the cost of standing out. "He's doing too much," she whispered to Jason, her voice low. "A black boy this visible, it draws eyes, not all of them kind." Jason nodded, his jaw tight. "I know," he said, "but he's building something here. I'll make sure it's safe." The park's harmony faltered when a park official, a white man in a stiff jacket, approached, his clipboard clutched like a shield. "Who's running this?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "This gathering's unpermitted. You need clearance for crowds this size." His eyes lingered on Paul, a flicker of disdain betraying his words. The crowd hushed, tension rippling. Paul paused, his hands still on Laura's ankles, but Jason stepped forward, his CEO edge cutting through. "This is a public park," he said, his voice low but unyielding. "This boy's helping kids, saving lives. You got a problem, take it up with me." The official bristled, but Jason's authority, backed by the crowd's murmurs, forced him to back down. He muttered about regulations and left, but the air held a lingering chill. The session continued, stronger for the interruption. Laura lifted her ankles slightly, Sophia pressed harder against the ball, and Tyler took 3 steps, his walker clattering with triumph. A young black reporter, her camera slung over her shoulder, approached Jason, her notepad ready. "What's special about this boy?" she asked. Jason's voice softened, thick with emotion. "He's a kid with nothing who gave us hope. He's teaching us all what it means to keep going." The reporter's story, titled "The Boy Who Healed a Park," hit the internet that night, going viral by morning. Clips of Paul kneeling with Laura, guiding Tyler, and smiling at Sophia spread, sparking comments of awe and offers of support. A local clinic emailed Jason, offering Paul a future scholarship to train as a physical therapist. Aunt Maria, reading the article on her phone, wiped tears from her eyes, her fears eclipsed by pride. As the session ended, Laura hugged Paul, her voice a whisper. "You're my best friend." Paul ducked his head, his cheeks warm, and handed her a new rubber. "And keep practicing, superstar." Jason watched, his chest tight with gratitude, knowing the park was no longer just a place. It was a movement, sparked by a boy the world had tried to overlook. Paul packed his bag, the crowd's chatter a soft hum, and stood under the maple, his small silhouette framed by falling leaves. The world was watching now, and though the road ahead held shadows, Paul's heart beat steady, ready for whatever came next. The 9th Sunday broke over Carver Park with a warmth that felt like a promise. The October sky a rare, unblemished blue, as if the world itself paused to witness what was coming. The maple tree, now half bare, its remaining leaves a defiant crimson, stood watch over Paul Perez's towel, spread like a sacred altar on the grass. At 10, Paul knelt with quiet reverence, his duffel bag open, the rice pack, rubber ball, and socks arranged with care. His patched jeans and duct-taped sneakers were relics of a harder past, but his dark eyes shone with a steady light, unclouded by the weeks of judgment and doubt. The park hummed with life, families in folding chairs, children laughing, a soft murmur of hope. But Paul felt a shift in the air, a weight that told him today was different. The crowd was larger than ever, a tapestry of faces drawn by the viral story of a boy who healed with nothing but his heart. Jason Martin's Tesla pulled up, its sleek frame a stark contrast to the park's earthy warmth. Jason stepped out, his face softer, the lines of exhaustion smoothed by a cautious joy. He lifted Laura from the back seat, settling her into her wheelchair, her blonde braid gleaming, her blue eyes sharp with determination. No blanket covered her legs today. She wore bright sneakers as if daring the world to notice. Jason pushed her toward the maple, his steps light, his gaze fixed on Paul with a trust forged through weeks of miracles. Laura's hands gripped the armrests, her lips set in a line that spoke of resolve, not fear. Paul stood, his spiral notebook tucked away, his voice steady. "Morning, Laura," he said, kneeling to her level. "You ready?" She nodded, no smile, just a fierce focus. That made the crowd hush. "Same as before," Paul said softly. "We help you stand, you do the rest." Jason moved behind her, his hands under her arms, while Paul guided her legs, positioning them with care. The park fell silent, the rustle of leaves the only sound, as if time itself held its breath. "On 3, Paul whispered. 1, 2, 3. Jason lifted. Paul steadied her knees, and Laura stood, her legs trembling, her arms shaking, but up, on her own 2 feet. A gasp rippled through the crowd, a mother clutching her chest, a child's eyes wide. Laura opened her eyes, a slow smile breaking across her face. "I'm standing," she said, her voice clear, a bell in the quiet. Paul blinked back, a shimmer in his eyes. "Yeah, you are." Jason froze, his breath caught, then let go. Laura stayed up, her balance fragile, but real. "She's doing it," he whispered, his voice breaking. Paul stepped back just enough, his voice low. "She's been doing it." Laura, brave and 6 and unafraid, took one shaky step, then another, then a third, her sneakers scuffing the grass before she fell into Jason's arms. He caught her, laughing through tears, his hands trembling as he held her. "You did it," he choked. "You did it." Laura turned to Paul, her grin radiant. "You said I would." Paul's smile was small, humble. "I said we'd try." The crowd erupted, cheers and sobs mingling as Tyler, gripping his walker, took a step, and Sophia lifted her knees higher, her parents weeping. The park, once a quiet corner, was alive with shared triumph, a testament to a boy who dared to believe. Paul sat on the bench watching, his silence louder than the noise. Jason approached, kneeling beside him, his voice thick. "Paul, you didn't just help Laura walk. You gave me my daughter back." Paul looked down, his fingers tracing his bag strap. "Grandma said helping makes us family." Laura wheeled over, hugging him. "You're my angel," she whispered. Her words, a vow. That night at the Martins' home, Jason handed Paul a new sketchbook, its pages crisp and waiting. "You're family now," he said, his eyes steady. Aunt Maria, sitting nearby, nodded, her fears eased by the warmth of the moment. Paul clutched the sketchbook, his voice soft. "Grandma would have liked this." Months later, Carver Park was reborn as Perez Park, a plaque gleaming under the maple, for Paul Perez, who showed us healing starts with heart. A community center rose, offering free therapy classes rooted in Paul's methods, volunteers carrying his lessons forward. Paul, now in school with a tutor, sketched under the tree, his pencil tracing sparrows. Laura ran nearby, her limp a badge of courage, her laughter echoing. The park thrived, families united, a legacy built by a boy who'd turned pain into possibility. Paul's voice, a quiet echo, lingered. Grandma said love's tougher than the world. Keep showing up, keep healing. The maple stood tall, its branches swaying, a witness to a new beginning. As the sun sets on Perez Park, Paul's story reminds us that hope and heart can change the world, one step at a time. What moved you most about this journey? Maybe it's Paul's courage, Laura's triumph, or the community that grew from a single act of kindness. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how this story touched you. A huge thank you for joining us, for letting this tale of healing fill your heart. Subscribe to catch more stories that inspire, and we'll see you next time, ready to discover another spark of humanity together.